Hey everyone, welcome to the Career Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Avila, and today's guest is really exciting. We have author Tamika M. Murray, the author of Crying, Learning, and Laughing: Why Students Visit the Teen Center. So Tamika talks all about changing her career path, discovering the right fit in your career. She's done everything from teaching English at a community college to social work, writing, self-publishing, starting her own company. She talks all about that journey throughout this episode. She also goes on to talk a lot about networking and how to network while introverted and why it's important to network. So please check out her book, Crying, Learning, and Laughing: Why Students Visit the Teen Center. It's out September 1st, and you can pre-order it on Amazon or visit her website at www.mikamurray.com. That's MIKAMURRAY.com, or you can check out our social media for the link. So please enjoy Tamika Murray. Hey everyone, welcome to the Career Journey Podcast, where we explore exciting careers and how to get them from the people who've lived it. I'm your host, Brittany Avila. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy. Hi Tamika, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
So we like to start from the very beginning. What did you want to do when you were a child? Or did you have anything in mind?
I'm laughing because what I wanted to do as a child changed often. I had a lot of interest. I did. I had a lot of interest growing up. I wanted to do everything from driving race cars
Oh,
to
wow.
to being a doctor. I've always had an interest in medicine and helping and healing people, as well as animation. I am a huge Disney fan.
Ooh,
And I was, drawn to Walt Disney movies, from a young age. And when I
yeah.
found out that there were actually people that, made these and, they actually colored the stills, I wanted to be that person that actually, the colorist that actually painted the stills and everything. But of course, that was before they switched over to computers. And that kind of like killed my dream a little bit,
Oh no.
The Little Mermaid is the last Disney animated film that was done by hand. And you can
Oh,
tell.
really?
Yes, it was. And you can tell when you look at it that it just has like a depth to it that some of the
Mm-hmm.
other films just don't quite capture. It's just
Right.
different. It's definitely different. But I will say two things that I wanted to do as a child. I actually did go on to do, which is teaching. I did have a chance to be a teacher. I was an adjunct English instructor for about 4 years at a local community college, and also writing. Writing was something that I fell in love with very early on, thanks to my mother.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of storytelling is weaved in there a little bit with teaching, writing, and animation.
Absolutely. Anything creative, I was always attracted to that.
So where did you go from there? You wanted to be maybe a teacher or a writer. What did you think you wanted to do maybe in like high school?
Okay,
How
so
did you prepare for college?
by the time that I got to high school, I actually started writing for a section of our local paper, the Press of Atlantic City. It was a
Oh,
section
nice.
called Generation Next, and it gave adolescents the opportunity to showcase their work in the paper. So
That's
I
cool.
actually thanks. It was basically I did film reviews. I got to go to an En Vogue concert.
Whoa.
And report about
So
it, which was
cool.
awesome. We didn't get a chance to meet them. They were trying, but it didn't happen. But you know what? I didn't even care. I enjoyed getting to go to a free concert and write about it.
Right?
With my cousin, actually.
Oh.
She also wrote for the same section, and we also went to the same high school. So we were chosen to go to the concert and co-author.
Yeah.
So after high school, and of course, while I was in high school, I did journalism. So I wrote a few articles for the school newspaper. And by the time senior year came along, like I knew that my major was going to be English literature and anything dealing with writing. So the first school that I went to was LaSalle University in Philadelphia. And it's a really good school. However, the neighborhood is not the best. It really isn't. So after about a semester there, I decided, you know what, I'd rather just be a little bit closer to home. So I transferred to what is called now Stockton University. It wasn't called that then, but it is now. And I absolutely loved my time at Stockton University. It was great. It had a very hippie vibe to it when I first went there. It's changed a lot over the years, definitely.
Nice. And so you majored in English literature the whole time you were there?
I did. I'll get to when I eventually switched to social work a little bit later, because I did return to Stockton for that. But for my first degree, I did get an English literature degree with a concentration in creative writing.
All right. And so where did you go from there?
Well, as life would happen, my mother, who I was extremely close with, she was a single mother and I was an only child. She was diagnosed with breast cancer about 6 to 8 weeks before I graduated from Stockton. So that kind of put, everything on hold for me, basically.
Yeah.
I ended up graduating from Stockton in December of 2004. So basically, right after I graduated, we had her birthday, we had mine, we're very close to Christmas. And, and then I took her to her first chemo treatment on my birthday, which was December 23rd. And, after that, I just stayed in the sector that I was working in the most, which was retail. My first job was in retail. I stuck with that through college. It was just, it was easy. Plus, I love clothes, so it was a nice, trade-off. I got a nice discount on my clothing and stuff. But I really helped her out, and breast cancer, it's no joke. It really isn't. She went through a lot, but she stayed very upbeat during the whole ordeal. Of course, you go through the treatments and all the testing and doctor's appointments, and then once she was in remission, we had to deal with plastic surgeries. She ended up having a mastectomy on one side, and it was just a lot of surgeries afterwards for reconstructive purposes. So during that time, again, I stayed in mostly retail, and then I switched over to, I got my first taste of teaching during substitute teaching in a local district, and it was very eye-opening. It was the district that I was teaching in. The town is considered relatively poor, low income, and at the time, the district was considered an APID district, which are basically, low income students, and they're also at risk for a lot of issues. So teaching there was great, and it kind of got me thinking about social work a little bit. It kind of started planting the seed. I transferred from substitute teaching to working as a program associate for a day program for children ages, I believe they were ages 3 to 5, and they were in child protective services. So the day program, it was basically a daycare, but we were also helping them to talk about their feelings. We were teaching them daily living skills, like they would brush their teeth, they would wash their face, and it was very good program, definitely.
Yeah.
And I appreciated all the things that I saw while I was there, and it kind of got me thinking of maybe going back to school for social work. But I wasn't quite there yet. It was just, it was something I was thinking about. And one of my coworkers, she pulled me aside and she was like, if you enjoy this work, you definitely should go back and get your degree in it, especially if you work for, at the time it was called the Division of Family Services, Youth Services in New Jersey, but they've since changed their name to DCP&P, which stands for the Division of Child Protection and Permanency. So, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe, if I do go back to school, that'll be my target. I'm trying to get into CPS work and see what I can do. So, After I left the day program, because it was very strenuous, it was very draining work. We would have to sometimes restrain the children physically because they would just have meltdowns from all the abuse that they had been through. Eventually, it took its toll on me. I was constantly getting sick, and it was wearing my immune system down. So I left there and actually got a fantastic opportunity to become an adjunct English instructor. Yes, it was something that in the back of my mind I had always thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to like teach at a college, and deal with adults and stuff and talk about, what I love, which is English and writing. And an opportunity presented itself. I saw the ad on their website and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. Like, even though I didn't have my master's, and I didn't have any previous experience teaching at a college, I went for it. I submitted the packet. I even delivered it in person, just to kind of add a little personal touch, just so they could see my face and everything. And I ended up getting an interview with the chairperson, of the English department, and she's wonderful. I believe she's still there too. And I was hired.
Nice. That's always my favorite, to hear when you aren't completely confident that you have all of the necessary requirements and you still get the job, because I love telling people that it can happen.
Absolutely, it totally can. And I even followed up too. I'm a big believer in following up because you just never know.
Right.
They depending on the position, as I would find out later with DCP&P, it can be very competitive. So you definitely have to make sure that you remind them that you're still here and still interested.
That's really good advice. My mom gave me that advice when I was younger, but I'm more nervous, and so I always hated doing that, but I still did it because she told me to, and I think it's paid off a little bit.
Yes, I can totally relate to that. Growing up, and even to this day, I'm very much an introvert.
Me too.
Yes, and very shy. It takes me a while to warm up to people, whether it be coworkers, even teaching to a certain degree. It's like I had to dig into the acting classes that I took in high school and college. Yes, I did force myself to take acting classes and public speaking, just to just kind of get out of my shell. So those skills definitely helped when I started teaching. That was a very interesting experience in and of itself. That was actually the turning point where I was like, you know what? After everything that I've seen and dealt with being in this classroom, it's time for me to switch over to social work. Because while I was teaching there, my students just, they got very comfortable with coming to me. I made myself very approachable. I made them know that I was always available. If something was going on and an assignment needed to be, turned in late, or if they were struggling with something, whatever the case may be, I wanted them to come to me. And I found that my students were coming to me with, a lot of issues that were going on in their personal life. I have one young lady in particular. She was 18 and she was in the process of completing both her junior and senior year coursework in high school consecutively because she had been out long-term for an illness. And, she was great in my class. She was always very interactive, very sweet, did her work. But then there was this phase that came where she missed, I would say, maybe 2 or 3 classes. And then when she came back, she was very withdrawn, wasn't participating. So I knew something was wrong. So I approached her after class one day, and she basically told me that her father had passed away. And I felt so bad for her that she had, waited to tell me. And I asked her, why didn't say anything? I would have totally worked with you, to help you. And she said that, coming back to class was something that helped her maintain some type of normalcy in her life. And she was actually in the process of becoming the guardian to 2 of her younger siblings, which I couldn't believe.
Yeah, that's a lot to take on.
Very much so, especially for somebody her age, where she's like on the cusp of, becoming a young adult. She should be thinking about college and where she wants to go, but no, she and her boyfriend were in the process of taking on a lot of responsibility. So I commended her for that, and she ended up sticking it through and completing the course, and she she asked. So after that happened, I was like, yeah, I think. And there were other stories as well. Some even worse than that with my students. They were dealing with a lot in their
They
personal
do deal with
lives.
a lot.
Absolutely. And of course, you tend to learn which students are basically trying to BS you, and
There are those, yeah.
yeah, they're trying to just get over and stuff because they just didn't want to do the work, and I understand that,
Yep.
I get it, but no, I was definitely able to kind of use my sixth sense and figure out which ones were sincere and to help them. So I made the decision to go back to school for social work.
Nice. And you said you went back to Stockton University?
I did. I did. I figured it was the easiest way, just to be able to, work and also get the degree that I wanted. And honestly, again, I loved my time at Stockton. I was on the cusp as to whether or not I should do master's or just a secondary bachelor's. And when I spoke to someone there, we reviewed the pros and cons, and I realized that social work, it's a tough field. It is. You're going to see
Mm-hmm.
anything and everything. And for somebody who really didn't have a background in it, I kind of did a little bit from being a program associate and working with the CPS kids. Um, but it was really, it wasn't the same, as going through
Mm-hmm.
the motions and being a full time social worker. So I opted to do the secondary bachelor's degree, which it worked out very well because my end goal was really to work in CPS, and in New Jersey, you do not need a master's degree to work in CPS,
Okay.
and that was my target. I ended up doing a concentration in child welfare, which was wonderful because I actually got to tailor my internship around working with children and adolescents. I did my junior year internship. That was more of a general placement where I worked with adults who were dealing with addiction and mental health issues. That was very eye-opening,
Yeah.
to say the least. And then senior year was when I focused on, getting the child welfare concentration internship. And I was placed in a middle school, which was about 45 minutes away from where I lived. Wasn't too happy about the commute, I'll admit it,
Right.
but it ended up being a wonderful opportunity because the program that I was interning in, it was in school, and the children, we had two types of interns in the program. I was an educational counselor, and then the master's level, they were doing more of the mental health. But we always worked together
Okay.
because a lot of the issues tended to overlap.
Of course.
And so it was great.
So it sounds like social work can be a variety of things. You're saying there's multiple kind of concentrations. You can do kind of multiple things. Do you want to walk us through kind of what social work looks like? Like what were you maybe doing on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, I love that question because because honestly, there's no 2 days that look alike. And when I even talk
Nice.
about when I became a case manager, I'll get into that as well. But no 2 days are the same. You might follow the same schedule. We followed the school schedule, the bell
Mm-hmm.
schedule, and there were certain days where if I had a student on my caseload that I needed to pull and meet with them, what I would do is I would make up my passes, hand deliver them myself, go down to the teacher, and I would pull the teacher aside and tell them who I needed to meet with. They didn't need to know why, but I would just let them know, I was from the program and that I needed to meet with so and so. And
Mm-hmm.
they had you know, they had the final say. They could always say, well, he or she has to take a quiz or a test, so I can send them down to you. They can come down to the office after they finish it, or could you just, pick a different period to pull them? And I never had a problem with it. I
Mm-hmm.
always worked around their schedule because you never wanted to pull them from, a core class like mathematics or English
Right.
or science. You really had to be creative to see a lot of these kids. And especially, if it was a course that they were doing poorly in, you definitely didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to take them from that class. But, we had incentives. The kids, if they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, we made out a case plan. So if they were, having issues with, say, taking notes, we would, review the notes, go over how to take notes, make sure that they had the notebooks. If they didn't have that, we could supply it for them, make sure that they had the folders. We were really teaching them organizational skills, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my students who had ADHD, this was something that they really struggled with, so you kind of had to be a little bit lenient on them, just
Yeah.
you realize that it wasn't going to happen overnight. But if you could get them to start taking notes or at least start completing their homework and turning it in, you felt like you had a big accomplishment there.
Right.
So the
Must be
student,
rewarding.
absolutely, and the students that were, on target and really showing improvement, a lot of times we rewarded them with points, the points added up. And for the students that accumulated a certain amount of points, they had a pizza party. So they loved that. They really did.
Oh, I remember loving pizza parties in school.
Me too. Me too. I still love pizza.
We should bring those back.
Absolutely. But yeah, it was a really good experience, and I feel like I learned a lot. I really connected with my field supervisor, who I still keep in touch with even today through social media. She was very, very just generous with her time and her experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was something that she needed to review with me or something that she wanted to do differently, she was always very respectful and never nasty, or micromanagement, nothing like that. She was very good.
Yeah, the type of boss you have kind of makes, or supervisor you have, makes a world of difference, doesn't it?
Oh my goodness, yes. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly believe that. I really do.
Yeah.
And I think that some people that are put into management positions, I really do believe that they mean well. It's just that they may not execute it the right way or
Yeah.
the best way for their employees.
Yeah. And so about how long were you in that career of doing social work? Are you still doing it?
I still maintain my state certification, which
Okay.
I'm actually in the process of doing the CEUs now. The deadline is August 31st, so I really have to get on the ball with that. But
Yeah.
I don't work in the field now, but I did gain a lot of experience. I've worked with Storm Sandy victims because
Okay.
the Jersey Shore and even up and down the East Coast was ravaged by Storm Sandy.
Yeah.
So that was great, being able to help people get money to help fix their cars or just pay their bills after the storm hit. So that was very heartbreaking
Yeah.
itself. But I felt like I was doing good work with that. And it just so happens that luck would have it, I applied to DCP&P. I want to say I applied to that maybe 9 months before I got the job working with Storm Sandy victims. It was a long process. From start to finish, I kid you not, it was 13 months.
Wow.
Yes, and it included going to 3 different career fests, as they call them, which are just a fancy word for extended interviews, which had multiple parts. And, I was finally hired there right before my position at the Storm Sandy program was terminated. They lost their funding. So I really wasn't there that long. And, had I not taken the job at DCP&P, I probably would have been out of the job very shortly after coming on board. And they did that because, a lot of people just weren't applying for funds anymore. So it was basically, use it or lose it type of thing. So when I got hired at DCP&P, that was a game changer. I think that anybody who works in social work, you will never have the same experiences that you have while working with CPS children, because you see, what they're living like in their homes. You're seeing a lot of abuse and just a lot of unpleasant things, and you want to try to bring as much warmth and sunshine to them as possible. I stayed there for a good year and a half, but my health honestly did start to suffer, and as luck would have it, or not, my mother's breast cancer did come back at the same time I was working for DCP. So my life during that phase was stressful to say the least.
Yeah.
Dealing with that at home and then bringing home what I was seeing at work. And, you do a lot of commuting your first year working for DCPNP. They have a child welfare training academy that you have to go through for the
Mm-hmm.
first 6 months or so of your time there, which is great. I think it's wonderful that they put you through so much training so that you know how to handle the situations that you're coming up against. But it was a lot of commuting. At the time, I was living like right outside of Atlantic City, and I was having to travel to New Brunswick, which for me, because I would always constantly run into traffic, my commute would be about a good 2.5 hours,
Oh,
sometimes
wow.
longer.
That's a lot for one day.
Oh, and then you have to go through the training and the role playing and all that stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was zonked out. But for my time that I was at DCPNP, I really feel like I helped my clients a lot. They were honestly devastated when I told them that I was leaving. Which, you don't ever want your clients to be upset, but that showed, that they really relied on me and really appreciated the help. I transferred out of there, and I needed to take some time away from social work, just because again my health was really poor. I have
Mm-hmm.
a thyroid disorder. I have hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid. So stress is really like the worst thing possible for your thyroid, because your thyroid
Right.
regulates your hormones, and if your hormones are out of whack, your whole body can basically start to shut down after a while. So I needed as much calm as possible while still trying to help my mother in the process. Um, so after I left there, I did take some time off. I had different jobs, just trying to really find myself and figure out whether or not social work was still for me, or if I wanted to transfer out, into something different. Like, was my health really worth, you know, basically trying to help other people. So self care, we always preach self care. And I really had to think about that. I really did. So what I did after I left there, I became a classroom aide for a bit, working in a charter school. And ironically, the charter school during their first 2 years, it was set up inside of my old elementary school, which
Oh,
I know that was interesting to say the least, because I loved my elementary school. I went to a Catholic school. I went to Catholic school ages K through 12, but I went to the same elementary school K through 8. So that was very, very exciting for me. I loved
yeah.
school. It was definitely different atmosphere, because it was being run by an outside company. And it was very stressful. I was dealing with one child in particular, again, had ADHD. He was very hyper, and we were dealing with issues with his medication, the dosages, what worked for him and what didn't, as well as other issues that he's dealing with education. So that opportunity was great. I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot from there. And then I also did a program aide. I became a program aide again for it was like a house for men, or young men that were bisexual or homosexual, and they were HIV positive. And the requirements for that was, they had to be HIV positive or have AIDS, and they had to identify as gay or bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
And that program was wonderful. The guys were entertaining,
Yeah.
to say the least. But we just tried to make it as fun as possible for them, because some of them had basically been thrown out from their families. They were either throwaways or runaways. And they really didn't have anywhere else to go. The person that was staying there in particular, his story really impacted me a lot. He shared a lot with us, which was great. That's why we were there. But it was just heartbreaking to hear what he had
Mm-hmm.
to go through with. After I left there, I transitioned into the teen center, which is probably, I'm going to say it was probably the most fun that I had as a social worker. Definitely. The teen center, basically for people that don't know, teen centers in New Jersey and other states as well have taken the model It's another name for youth services
Hmm.
in school, youth services programs. And, they're funded by the state as well as federal aid. And, they're specifically for students to help them bridge that gap between, what they might be lacking at home, what they might be lacking in the classroom. We provided free services for them so they could get mental health therapy. They could come down and receive free snacks. They loved coming down to eat their lunch because it gave them a break from being inside the school. Sometimes they just needed a break from that atmosphere, which sometimes we all do.
Yeah.
I would have loved a teen center in my high school, when I was growing up. It was just, it was a one-stop shop for kids that were dealing with, the typical teen issues, whether it be um, issues at home with their parents. Yes, some of the kids had abuse and neglect issues, as well as teen dating violence, or if it wasn't them, they were worried about somebody they knew, as well as just anything that you could really think of that a teen would go through in teen center. I will say that, one of the most difficult things for me to handle working with adolescents at the teen center was suicide. We dealt with a lot of kids who had suicidal ideations. And, you never want to hear that a kid is at that point. But unfortunately, it's the reality of the world we live in right now. So we would, if they, once we screened them and found out that they were in need of, better services, or not better, but just more in-depth, services, the referral would be made to the local psychiatric unit at my school. And they would come. A lot of times, even they would come, pick them up. But aside from that, the teen center was a great place to visit. Teens loved it. We had a huge TV. So streaming was always fun. Watching YouTube, during the recreational times, playing games. They loved music from the 80s and 90s, which just warmed
Yeah.
my heart. Yes, because I was
That's
born in
good to
80.
know.
Yes, I was born in
Yeah.
81, so I have a very long memory, and I remember a lot of stuff from the 80s and 90s, and loved
Right.
music growing up. So to be able to share that with them was great. Loved
I
it.
know. I still listen to the 80s and 90s music.
I do too, because honestly, I gotta say, it just, there's a certain depth to it that is
Hmm.
lacking with a lot of the music today. I'm not gonna say all of it, because occasionally I will hear, a new artist that I really like, but it's just not the same.
Well, it was that nostalgia of actually listening to the whole album and like having the
Yes.
book in front of you with the lyrics and everything, and you had to listen to the whole thing because you didn't really have the opportunity to just mix songs together.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And, just listening to the radio constantly, like, because a lot of them, they don't like the radio, and I can't really say that I blame them, in some
Right.
respects. But,
Yeah.
I made it clear that my cousins and I would listen to the radio all the time. I would fall asleep listening to the radio so I could make my
Yep.
mixtapes,
Yep.
so
Oh, I hated making mixtapes. It was so hard.
it was because, like, you would wait for your song to play, and then sometimes the DJ would, like, cut
Would
the
keep
beginning.
talking.
Yeah, you'd be like, be quiet. I want my song. Yeah, they'll never know the pain of waiting for your song to play. No. But yeah, just having memories like that and taking them on trips. That was the one of my favorite things to do, and my coworkers and my boss knew that. I loved planning the events, the activities, and the trips. We took them all over the place. Seriously, we went to the Franklin Institute a few times. We took them to this museum slash castle in northern New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
I know, it was really cool. It just, it was great trying to expose them to things that otherwise they wouldn't have normally been able to do or
Hmm.
participate in. We used to have guest speakers come. We would treat them to meals that would be catered by one of our favorite restaurants. Like, we would have like a pasta day, and the kids that normally come down to the teen center, we used to try to invite them and, like, let them get as much free food as possible. Just, yeah, we always tried to keep it light, because even when tragedies would strike, we still liked to let them know that the teen center wasn't all just doom and gloom. You didn't have to be
Right.
in a crisis to come there. So yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of fun. And so what made you leave that job?
You know what? I felt like there wasn't much room for growth. And there wasn't.
Mhm.
My boss was aware of that. There really wasn't. It was a small staff, honestly. It was just my program director, our clinician, mental health clinician. I was the full-time case manager. We had a part-time case manager, and then we would always take on interns from Stockton,
Mhm.
usually. But other than that, it was just our small little cluster. And I realized that I had outgrown that position, and I was just being drawn more and more back to writing, because writing, honestly, was what I wanted to do since I was a child, and yet part of me feels like I was kind of like running away from it at one point,
Right.
because growing up, I feel like there weren't as many opportunities for writers as there are now. Thanks to the
Mhm.
internet, there are tons of opportunities for writers now, but in the 80s and even 90s, when I was thinking about becoming a writer, it felt like your only outlet was either to newspaper, maybe magazine, and author. It felt like that was
Right.
where like the only, and if you were lucky, you were, able to maybe break into publishing, get hired by one of them and become like an editor, or work in television and movies, which seemed even more, unattainable,
Right.
basically. Yeah. So, I had been freelancing, honestly. I had started it after doing it in high school, whatnot, for the local paper. I had started freelancing back in 2008. I started a blog then, back when not as
Wow.
many people were doing blogging as they are now,
Yeah.
not even close. So I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, trying to deal with blogging, but it was nice. I definitely did a few freelancing, not just for my own blog, but I also, wrote articles for other online publications as well. So that kind of like gave me a taste of it. Um, so then when I got to this point where I was really doing a lot of soul searching, um, after, and I should say that I lost my mother. I didn't include that, but losing her was definitely a trigger for me to
Mhm.
kind of like take a good look and figure out what it is that I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And she was always my biggest cheerleader.
Mhm.
She always encouraged me with the writing. She gave me my first journal when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And, I stuck with keeping a journal basically up until my mid to late 20s, and now I just kind
Oh,
of like,
nice.
yeah, I have a written record of my life, which is awesome. And I kind of write, a few entries here and there sometimes, but not as much as I used to. But
Yeah.
losing her it was November of 2016, I just, I realized that she would want me to follow my dream, follow my aspirations. So I made the very difficult choice of leaving the teen center, and it was not an easy choice by any means. I used to tell my coworkers constantly that the only reason I'm still here is because of my kids, and that's the honest to God truth. I did everything for them, because I'm
Mhm.
listening to them, not just while we were out in the common area, but for my kids who, wanted to talk in private. I knew what they were going through, in their lives, and I wanted to be there for them as much as possible. But I also realized that, I can't just stay in a position to make other people happy. I had to make
Yeah.
myself happy as well. So, when I made that choice, I gave them plenty of time to find someone else, and give them a heads up, because I didn't want to leave, like give them the standard 2 weeks and that's it. No,
Yeah.
I let them know, I would say a good 2 months before I wanted to leave, because
Okay.
I knew from my experience, like the hiring process, it was, it was a lot of back and forth with HR. Um,
Mhm.
it was a process to it, so I wanted them to have the time to find somebody. And as it would turn out, the part-time case manager took my position, which was great.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it was less training. I tried to train him as much as possible, because being the part-time case manager, um, I mean, he did a lot of the things that I did, but it wasn't until I had to train him on other stuff that he really saw like how
What you
detailed my
did.
position was. Yes, absolutely. And on top of having a caseload and planning events and everything and doing coverage out in the common area, I also facilitated the pregnancy prevention group. Baby Think It Over is what we called it. And yeah, I loved it. That was another,
That's cute.
yeah, it was probably our most popular group. I used to have a waiting list of people
Oh,
who
wow.
wanted to participate in the group. And I think mostly it was because, well, yeah, you got to talk about babies, and how to prevent them. But then we also talked about what would happen, if you did have an unexpected pregnancy. We talked about creating a budget based off of New Jersey, and they saw how expensive it is to live in
A
this
baby
state.
is expensive.
Yes, absolutely, and especially if they were going to be a teen mom or dad,
Yeah.
because I wanted boys and girls to take this group, because as I told them, especially with the boys, I'm like, if a baby's coming, it's both parents' responsibility. It's not just
Yeah.
the female. So that was a good message I was trying to get across to them.
Yeah.
But they got to take baby dolls home, like computerized baby dolls.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the group, yes. And, I let them know babies record everything. So I can see, when I generate the report, whether or not it's been fed one time, changed, whether it's been used, and all of that. So,
Oh,
that
we've
was
come a long
definitely.
way since the bag of flowers that we used to take.
Absolutely. And, the sad thing is, because I went to a Catholic, high school, we didn't even do that, because
Right.
their mentality was, abstinent. And
Abstinence.
that's it. Which, I mean, I guess to a certain degree it did work, because looking back, I can honestly say there were only 2 girls that I know of that got pregnant during the time that I was there, and, compared to what you're seeing now, in some high schools, that's like nothing. Absolutely
Yeah.
nothing. So yeah, the program definitely helped. But yeah, I think what ended up happening is that one of the interns who was about to graduate, she was going to come on board as the part-time case manager, so she was going to take
Okay.
over the Baby Think It Over group, so you wouldn't have to.
Well, it's nice too, because the teens didn't have to transition to somebody completely new right away either.
They didn't, but they were upset with me.
Yeah.
Because, with a lot of kids and teens, it takes time for them to open up
Yeah.
to people. So yeah, they were not happy with me at all. I had some of my kids literally saying, "How could you be leaving me?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not just leaving you. I'm leaving the position." And they didn't want to hear it at first, but
Yeah.
they came around. So then when I transitioned into being a freelance writer, it was like a whole different world. It really
Yeah.
was. I had all this free time to myself, when I wasn't writing, and it was just like, it was a big adjustment, honestly.
Mhm.
Definitely. I missed my kids from day one. It just felt strange that I wasn't there with them, and not going and hearing about their stories and what they were going through. But building myself up as a freelance writer, which I'm still, to a certain degree, I'm still doing that. It's only been
Mhm.
a year since I transitioned. It's been an eye opener. It's definitely been a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
got hired by, I believe, 2 or 3 different agencies, like right off the bat. So I've written for all types of different topics. If you name it, I've probably written about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, although I will say, recently I've been definitely niching down, because I'm at the point now where I have so many samples and I've, done so much that, I would just prefer to write about social work topics, especially
Mhm.
adolescents. That's my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And was it a little scary to be in freelance writing? Is that something that's
Yes.
stable? How does that work?
it it's very, very scary. I will say that. And I was fortunate that I had savings. I would say to
Mhm.
anybody who's going to attempt freelance writing to definitely have savings before they, you know, go into it, because you just
Mhm.
never know. And now with everything that's been going on with the pandemic, um, a lot of freelance writers really are hurting, or scrambling to try to pitch people because the same process that worked previously may not work now. And a
Right.
lot of businesses may not be outsourcing, for their writing like they were before, just because of the economy and everything with that. But honestly, freelance writing is great. There are plenty of freelance writers who have transitioned into full time,
Mhm.
opportunities with magazines and even companies. The biggest thing that I learned about freelance writing is that a lot of times, the really well paying jobs are not the ones that you necessarily see posted online. A lot of those come from networking and who you know,
Right.
So, it's definitely beneficial to join groups on Facebook. I can honestly say I got one of my best paying gigs off of Facebook group, and it
Wow.
was really nice. Yes, I got to write copy for a university for one of their pages. So
Nice.
yes, it was really great. So
Yes, social media networking is kind of an introvert's dream.
it is
That's where I get most of my networking from.
absolutely. I totally agree. And, it's really nice. Now, once I transitioned into wanting to write my book, I realized that certain aspects, don't necessarily work for authors as they do freelance writers, meaning you're going to want to put yourself out there more, and
Mhm.
if I had the opportunity to go to, say, conferences, even now, I definitely would jump on the opportunity to go to a conference and just meet with people, and be able to just talk to them, and
Right.
hear their story, because a lot of times that will lead to other things down the road.
Mhm.
And it could also just lead to finding a friend, a professional
Right.
friend who you can talk to and, share your stories and your successes with.
I think that was one of the biggest lessons I learned with networking, kind of being introverted and shy and a little scared and nervous.
Mm-hmm,
I was always scared to network because I thought it was like using people almost a little bit, like, oh, I'm just introducing myself to like get something from them.
mm-hmm,
And the biggest lesson I learned was a lot of networking is just trying to make friends and just trying to be, comfortable with people and having a relationship with somebody. And that made it a lot easier for me because I was like, oh, I can meet people and, genuinely be interested in them and be friends with them. And then that can translate maybe into something later on. And I think that was a good lesson to learn, that it's not always about kind of chasing what you need from somebody. Sometimes it's just about establishing relationships.
I completely agree. Absolutely. And, I find myself trying different things, now with the book and being an author in general. There's different tactics that you can use, but I think really, harnessing the energy of social media is
Mhm.
definitely one of the best things that you can do. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book. That's coming out September 1st, right?
It is. And
All right.
ironically, it's about the teen center. And
Awesome.
I laugh about that because, my coworkers, everybody knew that I was a writer and, they had read some of my stuff at the teen center. And I joked with my coworker and I said, well, I don't think I'll ever write a book about the teen center. We both kind of like made a look at ourselves. We made like faces like, probably not. And here I am, a little over a year later, and my book, it's called Crying, Learning, and Laughing: Why Students Visit the Teen Center. And it will be available September 1st. And, I became inspired to write it because, again, I was just missing my kids very much. And,
Mhm.
when you're not an employee at a location, you're not privy to information, so you can't really catch up and see how they're going because of confidentiality and all that stuff. So I just decided to take everything that I had learned and put it out there for other people, because one many times when I was working for the teen center and I would tell people like where I was working, and even other parents would ask like, why aren't there more teen centers? Why have I not heard about this? And I just figured that putting the information out there for people to find will help to spread and the awareness of why teen centers are vital nowadays. You're giving kids the tools and the resources to succeed and to graduate from high school and to go on to whichever career or careers they decide to do. We went through everything with those kids. We would go through job applications. We would help them with college applications, scholarships, you name it. We did so much to help them. And, we're not the only teen center that would do that. There are teen centers throughout New Jersey in all the 21 counties, but they're not in every single school. So, my dream for this book would be to help promote the quality of these services and hopefully spread the word so that, one day teen centers will be in every single school to help kids.
Yeah, I mean, those services, just helping with job applications, college applications, teenagers need that tremendously.
Yes, they do. And, it's great if the teens have, the help at home. It's wonderful, but sometimes they don't. And that's not to say anything negative or bad about their parents or guardians. It's just that sometimes people, they just don't have the time, so they need the help. And that's why teen centers are fantastic. They help to bridge that gap. They honestly do.
Yeah, I find that even in college. I find a lot of first-generation students, they just don't, their parents, I was a first-generation student. My parents would try to help as much as they could. They just had no experience in it. They didn't know what to do. And so having a center like that would be amazing.
Yes. Like I said, I would have totally utilized those services while I was in school. All the time. I would have probably been down there every day because we had regulars that would come down every single day, even if it was just for lunch, even if it was just for study hall, and they wanted to play, a game of Monopoly or Sorry or Uno. Uno was very popular with the kids too, because kids tend to talk while they're playing games. So sometimes you could find out things that you needed to know just from being there and doing something fun.
Yeah. And teenagers need that support. I don't know about everybody, but my teenage years were probably the hardest out of everything.
Yes. And, looking back, because I have the journals, I read over things that just seemed like they were huge at the time. And now it's like I'd be able to just shake it off, and not have an issue with it. But when you're a teenager, you just don't know any better. You never had that experience before, so how would you know how to handle it, So, having someone to come to and talk to is very important. A lot of these kids felt very comfortable talking to me and my coworkers more than they did with their own parents. And again, that's not to show any negativity towards their parents. It's just, I guess they wanted to use us as a sounding board. In a lot of situations, they would talk to us first, and then I would just encourage them, if something was really serious, to open up to their mom, dad, grandma, whoever, and see how it goes. And I would tell them, you might be surprised with how they react, because they were always afraid of getting in trouble. I feel like we're taught that from a very early age, like you don't want to get in trouble. So, and a lot of times it would turn out a lot better than they had expected. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know. I think in teenage years, you have a tendency to kind of see everything as a big event. And so it might seem really scary, and you'll have a hard time. You have a harder time talking to your parents than anyone else in general, just because, again, they have that power to get you in trouble.
Oh, they do. And again, because I was so close with my mother, I was basically a very good kid. Like, I really didn't cause her trouble. And she used to say that all the time. She was like, I am so blessed. She was like, I am so thankful I had you because, she would tell me about her friends, and people that she knew that had kids and they didn't have the type of relationship that we had. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I grew up with her because she had me at 22, which for me, someone who doesn't have children yet, and I'm 38, that seems young.
It is, yeah.
So, but she was a fantastic mom. She was able to walk that fine line between being authoritative but fun at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody can pull that off
No,
successfully.
it's difficult.
Yeah. So, but again, I was nervous to talk to her about certain things that were bothering me. My cousins always felt comfortable going to her because she was the fun aunt. So they would
Yeah.
go to her all the time. But with me, it was like I just got this, like, I would get like this tightness in my chest. If it was something that I really didn't want to say or couldn't say, I would just write it. I got into the habit of like writing
Mm-hmm.
her letters and notes and just like leaving it on her bed, and she would read it. So,
I always found that easier too. That's how I did most of my relationships as a teenager. I'd be like, I just need to write you a letter. I can't talk. It's easier that
yes,
way.
it's wonderful. That reminds me that my best friend that I had in elementary and high school, we used to write each other letters during the summer. I just thought it was something neat. I thought
Yeah.
it was a lost art. And
Oh,
I still have some of the letters that she sent me.
yep.
It's pretty interesting to read them, 20 something years later.
And with writing your book, did you also start a publishing company? Or are you self-publishing?
Oh, yes, I did,
How's
which just adds to the list of responsibilities. But
So
no,
what was
I
that
was
like?
so excited. I actually started the publishing company while I was still at the teen center. Like, I was just like
Okay.
foreshadowing, like I could just see it. I was thinking ahead. Because this isn't actually the first book that I've written. I actually wrote my memoir as my first book,
Oh.
but it still needs a lot of work. And I'm just not, seriously, like, I know that it needs a lot of work and a lot more
Yeah.
like crafting and developmental issues going on. So I'm not near ready to put that out. But for when I am, it's about my time at DCP&P and what it was like
Okay.
to deal with my mom, going through her second bout of breast cancer and what it was like to be a CPS worker as well. So I look forward to getting back to that eventually. But I did start Celestial Publishing LLC back in September of 2018, and I will be
Mm,
self-publishing my book here next.
nice. Congratulations. It's almost the anniversary.
Thank you. Yes, and the anniversary of the LLC, coming into fruition is it's going to happen about 10 days after my book comes out. So I
Nice.
didn't plan that initially, but it's just nice that they, will be coinciding with each other a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say that for anybody who is thinking about starting their own LLC, definitely do the research,
Hmm.
and just make yourself knowledgeable. I feel like I learn something new every single day with just trying to
Yeah.
get this book like finished and ready, and uploaded. But almost there.
Nice. And with the publishing company, is it primarily your own work? Are you planning to take on other authors?
For right
Or have you
now,
taken on?
yes, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. For right now, it is just my own work because I
Hmm.
feel like for me personally, I want to go through the process a few
Right.
times, maybe two, even three times before I decide to take somebody else's work into my hands, and have that
Got it.
responsibility. But that is the end goal, to eventually, take submissions and put other people's work out besides my own.
Nice. All right. Well, we're coming up on time right now. Do you have any kind of last minute advice that you like to give about maybe starting your own or branching out or just
I
any career advice?
One thing that I will say is if you're thinking about changing careers, you don't want to jump too quickly. Do your
Hmm.
research, have some savings, even talk to other people that are doing what you want to do. That's always helpful. But don't be afraid either. I keep in touch with so many of my coworkers that still work for, say, DCP&P, and they're not happy in what they do, but they stay. And a lot of
Hmm.
times it has to do with income, and I get that. You want to make sure that you're transitioning into something that's going to help you maintain your life and pay your bills. But don't be afraid to take a risk. Either. You can't be afraid to make yourself happy. Absolutely.
Yeah, self-care.
Yes.
It's paramount. Well, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me and inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to hear your story.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Head over to our website at careerjourneypodcast.com for more info, the latest episodes, and to join the discussion about careers. See you next time.